These groups are leveraging the war in Gaza to incite violence all around the world in pursuit of their own ideologies. It's nothing new, and it's not going to stop anytime soon. Of course, we're talking about Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State. Now, there's been a lot of violence carried out all around the world since October 7th, some in response to what Hamas did, others in response to the Israeli follow-on actions in Gaza and the West Bank. This video, we're going to focus on the connections between Gaza, the Palestinian people, Hamas, Al-Qaeda, and the Islamic State. In a future video we're working on now, we're going to talk about the violence that Palestinians have faced all around the world. Now, looking at some of the attacks that as of now are at least loosely associated to Islamic State or Al-Qaeda, starting on October 13th, a French school teacher was stabbed and 2 additional people were wounded by a man who said he was acting for the Islamic State in a video he recorded before the attack. Then on October 17th, Brussels police officers shot and killed a Tunisian national after he gunned down 3 Swedish soccer fans, 2 of whom were subsequently killed in the attack. That attacker, in a previous video prior to the attack, said that the Quran was, quote, a red line for which he is ready to sacrifice himself. And then in Montreal, there have been multiple instances of gunfire aimed at Jewish schools, as well as Molotov cocktails thrown at a Jewish charity and community center in that same city. Now, fortunately, nobody was killed or wounded in those attacks in Montreal, and while no suspects have been apprehended, Al-Qaeda did come out and praise those attacks. So taking a look at the relationship between Islamic State, Al-Qaeda, Hamas, and the Palestinian people, it's messy. There's a lot of emotions here. So Islamic State views Hamas as an apostate group due to what Islamic State says is Hamas's participation in the international system as well as having democratic elections. That's all a no-go for Islamic State. They've even made threats against Hamas in the past. Going back a couple years, Islamic State referred to them as the tyrants of Hamas, saying that, quote, Sharia law will be implemented in Gaza in spite of you, end quote. So they're not best friends in a lot of ways, but either way, within 2 weeks of the October 7th attack, Islamic State did put out a statement in their Al-Naba magazine where they called for the targeting of Jewish people around the world, including the embassies of Israel and its allies. But this statement didn't mention Hamas by name, like at all. Think about that. Think about talking about the October 7th attacks and the subsequent war going on in Gaza and somehow managing to not ever say Hamas, the group responsible for that attack. That's what Islamic State did here. But while not mentioning Hamas, they did call on all Muslim youths fighting there in Gaza to act. And they offered kind of generic operational advice, which included suggesting the increased use of suicide belts. Then shifting over to Al-Qaeda, when looking at their view of Hamas and the Palestinian people, are a little more tolerant, which is weird to say that a terrorist organization like Al-Qaeda is the more tolerant of this group. But when you put them side by side with Islamic State, that's kind of the position they take. So Al-Qaeda's General Command, which is the group's leadership operating in Afghanistan and Pakistan, put out a statement recently saying, quote, your brothers in Al-Qaeda and all Mujahideen stand with you, side by side in the same trench, referring to Hamas fighting Israeli forces in Gaza. Additionally, Al-Qaeda put out statements congratulating those that took part in the October 7th attacks, calling it, quote, a turning point in history that presented a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for Muslims to liberate Palestine and the jewel of all Islamic battles of our modern history. So pretty significant words there, right? They're really talking about this as one of the most significant events that have taken place in modern history. Sticking with Al-Qaeda, we've got a couple of their branches we're going to run through here. The Somalia-based Al-Shabaab, which is Al-Qaeda's largest and wealthiest affiliate, controls most of Somalia at this point, has been using social media to try to capitalize on the ongoing war in Gaza by drawing parallels between what is happening with the Palestinian people and the Somali civil war, as kind of pitching them both as a sort of anti-imperialist struggle. So they Al-Shabaab referred to Hamas as their close brothers in the fight against their colonial oppressors. Al-Shabaab even, over the past couple months here, created new Telegram channels specifically designed to share Hamas updates and footage presented in Somali. Additionally, Al-Shabaab has hosted quite a few rallies in support of, broadly the Palestinian people, Hamas, anyone fighting Israel at this point, chanting things like, "Oh Jews, Muhammad's army will return," while they burned American and Israeli flags. Then the Yemen-based Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, otherwise known as AQAP, released a statement praising Hamas's, quote, brave attack that they carried out in Israel on October 7th. In this statement, they called on the people of Egypt, Jordan, Syria, and Lebanon to remove, quote, the agent leaders of the West and East from their path, which is a sentiment derived from the common al-Qaeda narrative that Arab state leaders are agents of power and kind of under the direct influence of foreign powers such as the United States and Iran. Al-Qaeda, Iran, Islamic State, they're not all buddies. They might not be our friends, but doesn't mean they all get along. Additionally, the emir of AQAP, Khalid Batarfi, called for Muslims around the world to kill Jews, Christians, UK and US citizens in response to the Israeli invasion of Gaza. Then one more al-Qaeda affiliate here, Al-Qaeda in the Indian subcontinent, AQIS, praised the October 7th attacks with the utmost joy, pleasure, delight, and happiness, casting the fight as one in a global war against all Muslims. Then in South Asia, AQIS Central Command published a 3-page document calling on their supporters to all take up jihad, claiming that the distance from Palestine was no excuse for not joining the struggle. Additionally, they called on Muslims to arm themselves, to breach Israel's borders, and incited violent attacks against Jewish and Western targets all throughout the Muslim world. Now, all these calls by Islamic State and al-Qaeda for violence against Israel, the United States, and anyone else standing in their way, it is notable, but it's not really surprising, and it's nothing new. So al-Qaeda's commitment to the Palestinian cause, at least rhetorically, has been essentially unwavering since their founding. I mean, the destruction of Israel is part of al-Qaeda's founding principles. And bin Laden at one point said, quote, America shall never dream of peace as long as Muslims in Palestine don't live in peace. And they have had pretty strong words for Israel going back to the opening days of al-Qaeda, but historically they haven't really carried out any action inside of Israel. Instead, al-Qaeda has kind of taken the path of provoking violence against Israel's allies, the United States mostly, abroad. Anyone who supports Israel becomes an immediate target of al-Qaeda and their attacks. And of course, bin Laden did link the September 11th, 2001 attacks to the U.S. backing, both economically and militarily, of Israel. And then even after the 9/11 attacks, bin Laden hinted that Tel Aviv could potentially be the next target. And then moving back to the first World Trade Center bombing in 1993, which killed 6 and wounded more than 1,000, Ramzi Youssef, the man responsible for that attack, cited Israel's actions as his primary reason for doing so, stating that he had friends and relatives both killed by the Israeli Defense Forces. And then in 2002, a significant coordinated attack was carried out in Bali that killed 202 people. Some of those that carried out the attack cited the U.S. invasion of Afghanistan as the reason for doing so. But one man, Umar Patek, who was convicted for his role in the bombing, said that his action, his reason for taking place, was a response to Israel's raids in the Jenin refugee camp earlier that year. We just can't fully separate what's happening in Gaza right now to the increased likelihood of terrorist attacks all around the world in the near future. It's just, look, it's happened in the past. We have the blueprint, and we're watching it play out right now. I mean, the footage coming out of this war is unlike anything we've seen in past conflicts between Israel and the Palestinians. So right now, every video of a child being killed, every innocent civilian that is wounded or killed in Gaza, every mosque that is destroyed, every piece of critical infrastructure that is damaged beyond repair, all of that is being shared already today across Al-Qaeda and Islamic State social media channels, as well as many others, right? It's not only militant Islamic groups that get their hands on this news and share it. They're taking advantage of it, but it's everywhere. And every one of those videos, every one of those pictures, every one of those tragic stories of the loss of life coming out of Gaza just increases the likelihood that somebody is either going to decide they're going to join one of these groups to actually do something about it. Maybe they join Hamas. Maybe if they're not in Gaza or the West Bank, they decide to join a group like Islamic State or Al-Qaeda who say, hey, we're going to do more than that. Rather than just attack Israel, we're going to attack Israel's backers. Or maybe it just inspires some lone wolf attacks, kind of like what we've seen already. So as I brought up before, this is a relatively local war that could lead to effects all around the world. And the groups that can bring that violence to places like New York, San Francisco, London, and Paris, they're watching this every single day to see what they can leverage to make those attacks a reality. But that's all I've got for now. Thank you to Peter Smith for his help with the research on this piece. You can find more from Peter at the link in the description below. But thanks for watching. I'll see y'all next time.